Hey folks, welcome to the 7th week. Quick update and then we'll get going with the materials for this week. Update. I've been taking a look at all of your project ones and I have scored them. All of the scores should be posted on Turnitin. And so you should know where you stand thus far on the course. If you don't see all of your points totaled, feel free to send me an email and I'll see what the issue is. So we're about 1/4 of the way through the semester in terms of projects. We're obviously a little bit further into the semester in terms of weeks. But yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. Now, let me prepare you for what we're doing now in the second unit. The second unit picks up on those notions of critical literacy that we had started with, except now we're going to frame critical literacy in a really specific way. And so now we're going to look at literacy and thinking about academic writing. And you'll see me sometimes refer to it as sophisticated writing or intellectual writing. And I'm using that terminology because those are the terminology that's sometimes used in some of the readings that we've been doing. Speaking of readings, last week I asked you guys to take a look at two readings, an excerpt from Fahrenheit 451, and then that short little article, Hidden Intellectualism. And I asked you guys to read those texts, and I wanted you to pull out some of the similarities that you saw in those texts, especially with regard to what they had to say about thinking and writing in an intellectual/academic way. And in Fahrenheit 451, in that conversation between Faber and Montag, Faber really starts to articulate what he sees as intellectual or academic thinking and writing. And ostensibly, he's talking about books, but essentially, he's not talking about only books, he's talking about the way that we frame information. And in that conversation, he highlights that books allow us to look at things with vivid detail or even new detail. He contrasts the way that people speak in books to how people speak about information in other ways. And he uses this line, I love this line. The comfortable people want only wax moon faces, poreless, hairless, expressionless. And in a sense, you can take that notion of wax moon face and you can connect it to the way that people talk about things that's really ambiguous, that's vague, that doesn't necessarily have clear support or reasoning. And for Faber, this doesn't really get at the meat of the matter, all right? That he wants there to be far more complexity in the sorts of conversations that people have. And so when he's looking at these academic or intellectual conversations, he wants people to be able to have positions and to understand other positions that they may not agree with, right? And to really tackle how all of these ideas kind of come together. And that's the same real idea that's happening in Hidden Intellectualism, right? There we have Gerald Graff talking about how via growing up loving sports, he was able to start thinking in this kind of intellectual or academic way, specifically in terms of how he was able to build argument, how he's able to marshal evidence, how he's able to see various viewpoints, synthesize viewpoints, right? He's got a couple paragraphs where he's just listing what it means to think and write in an academic way. And so I think that there's a lot of kind of complements that are happening in these two texts. I've highlighted a couple of students' writings on these texts because I think they've done an excellent job of really kind of pulling out some of the ideas that we're going to be working on throughout the second unit. And speaking of the ideas we'll be working on in the second unit, for this week, I'm going to ask you guys to take a look at two videos that I've posted inside the week's materials. And these videos are handing us the foundational concepts for what we'll be doing. One video really gets into what we're going to call kind of academic concepts for building argument. And so it lays out kind of the necessity of providing a clear qualified claim. It lays out the sorts of assumptions we have to take into consideration when we're writing argument. It lays out how we have to write in a certain tone that's respectful and not necessarily dogmatic. And then the second video I'm providing takes the very notion of reasoning and it gives us some patterns that we can consider as we put together our second projects. So I'm going to ask you to take a look at those two videos this week, and then I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of work in the blog. And for the blog this week, I'm going to have you do two things. Number one, I'm going to ask you to go back to the Hidden Intellectualism article, and I want you now to start to analyze some of the paragraphs that Gerald Graff has written, but I want you to look at the concepts that I'm introducing this week and to see how those concepts play out in those paragraphs. Because Gerald Graff, being a professor, is obviously writing something that we would consider sophisticated or intellectual or academic, though it doesn't necessarily come off as only like, here's some research, here's some research, here's some research. In other words, there are other moves that we make Right? There's other patterns of reasoning that we use that make things work in a more academic way. And then finally, I'm going to ask that you guys begin brainstorming potential project ideas for your second project, because in the second project, you have a choice in terms of subject, and I'm really interested then in how you treat that subject. So you've got a blog entry that's due next week. It'll be due next week on Thursday at 12. And I hope that I've clarified what we'll be doing. If you have any questions, let me know. Take care.